Most people spend their lives believing what they hear, not Scorpios. Scorpios listen to what wasn't said. They notice the pause before the answer, the smile that arrives half a second too late, the compliment that sounds too good to be true. This isn't gratuitous distrust. It's a tool, an internal radar that was forged almost always in an old pain. The first time someone deceived you and you realized it, but no one believed you. And that's where most people go wrong when trying to explain this sign. They call it jealousy, paranoia, drama. But what really happens inside a Scorpio is much more sophisticated than that. It's an emotional reading system so refined that it can notice contradictions between what a person says and what a person feels in real time, almost without conscious effort. It's almost like a sixth sense trained by years of silent observation. But this gift comes at a price, because seeing too much also means carrying too much. A Scorpio often knows about betrayal before it happens, feels the distance growing in a relationship weeks before the breakup, perceives the envy hidden behind a friendly smile. And what does he do with this most of the time? He keeps it to himself, alone. Because talking about what he feels would seem crazy to someone who doesn't operate at the same level of perception. Have you ever noticed how some people avoid the gaze of a Scorpio? It's not fear of the obvious, it's a discomfort they themselves can't explain, the feeling of being read inside as if an emotional X-ray were passing through every word they choose so carefully. It's almost too uncomfortable to admit aloud. But why does it bother them so much? Why is there something about this gift that makes even the most confident falter? The answer begins to emerge when we understand how this mechanism truly works from the inside. It's not magic, it's not luck, it's a pattern built layer by layer, almost always from childhood, almost always without choice. Imagine a child who learned too early that adults don't always tell the truth, that promises are broken, that everything is fine sometimes means the exact opposite. This child doesn't choose to become hyperperceptive. They are forced into it as an emotional survival mechanism. And what was protection in childhood becomes, in adulthood, a practically involuntary radar, one that detects inconsistency even before the conscious mind understands why. That's why Scorpio is rarely deceived twice by the same person, not because they are resentful, as so many insist on repeating, but because their internal system has already catalogued the pattern. It already knows how that energy behaves when it's about to hurt. And here's something almost no one talks about. This gift doesn't only point outward, it also points inward. Because whoever sees the flaws of others so clearly, sooner or later, is forced to look at their own shadow with the same brutal honesty. And that's precisely where the uncomfortable question arises. What if the gift that protects you from others is the same one that prevents you from trusting those who truly deserve it? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. It's called The Divine Wisdom That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. It's not a prediction manual or a list of loose characteristics about your sign. It's something else. An invitation to not stop at the surface of your own nature. Because if you are a Scorpio or live with one, you already know that the shallow version of this sign, intensity, jealousy, mystery, has never been enough to explain what really happens inside. This material was designed precisely for that, to give you language for what you already feel, but never had words to name. And perhaps you're feeling it right now. That uncomfortable realization of having spent your entire life reading others with surgical precision, while simultaneously doubting yourself whenever someone said, "You're exaggerating." This discomfort isn't weakness. It's an invitation to understand once and for all why this gift exists and how it can stop draining you and finally begin to set you free. And this isn't something to put off. It's precisely now, in this moment of recognition, that change begins to make sense. The link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. Now, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. When was the last time you noticed a lie before it was told, and nobody believed you? Because that feeling of seeing beyond what others can see is not just perception, it's power. A power that Scorpio carries from a very young age, but rarely learns to use without hurting themselves in the process. There's a huge difference between distrusting everything and seeing clearly. The first comes from fear, the second comes from experience, and it's precisely this fine line that separates the wounded Scorpio from the Scorpio who has made peace with their own gift. Because when this internal radar is finally understood, it ceases to be a constant alarm system and becomes something rare, true discernment. The ability to say yes to those who deserve it and no to those who don't, without guilt, without drama, without needing proof. But getting there requires going through a phase that few admit aloud: isolation. Because when you notice too much, sooner or later you start to distance yourself from people who lie without realizing they're lying, from environments that require pretense to function, from relationships built on half-truths, and this distancing from the outside seems like coldness. From the inside, it's survival. There is a moment, almost always silent, when the Scorpio understands that protecting their own heart is not the same as closing it off. That there is a way to keep their radar on without turning every relationship into an investigation. This is the true maturation of the gift, using perception as a compass, not as a wall. And this is where the most unsettling contradiction appears, because the same gift that identifies the betrayal of others with such precision is often the last to recognize one's own self-betrayal. How many times has a Scorpio ignored their own tiredness, their own pain, their own limits, simply because they were too busy reading the signs of others? How many times has this radar pointed outward when it should first have pointed inward? The question that remains is, are you protecting the other person, or are you avoiding looking at your own vulnerability? If this question bothered you, it's because it should. The divine wisdom that guides your zodiac sign towards a purposeful life speaks precisely to this, about how to transform perception into self-knowledge and not just vigilance. For a Scorpio, going deep has never been optional. It's instinctive. But going deep within yourself with the same courage you use to decipher others is the next step that few dare to take. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Those who live closely with a Scorpio know something that is rarely said aloud. This gift is also a form of love. Because when someone sees you completely, your contradictions, your little lies, your fears disguised as indifference, and still decides to stay, that's not naivete. It's a conscious choice. It's the kind of love that only exists after the illusion has already fallen. And that's precisely why enemies fear this gift more than anything else. It's not the intensity that's frightening. It's the impossibility of maintaining the mask for long around someone who sees through it. A person who pretends, who manipulates, who constructs convenient narratives about themselves, feels an almost physical discomfort near a Scorpio because they know deep down that they are being read. And nobody likes to be read when they have something to hide. That's why there's so much ready-made discourse trying to diminish this sign, to call vengeful someone who simply refuses to feign forgetfulness, to call possessive someone who simply recognizes, with painful precision, the exact moment when the bond began to unravel. It's easier to label than to admit. There's someone here who sees beyond what's socially acceptable. The pain of being misunderstood for seeing too deeply has an antidote, and it's not in hiding. It's in understanding your own inner workings with real depth. That's exactly the proposal of divine wisdom that guides your zodiac sign towards a purposeful life. Stop apologizing for perceiving too much and start using that perception as a purpose, not as a burden. This material was written for those who are tired of explaining themselves and just want to finally understand themselves. The last copies are practically sold out, and access may be removed at any time. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's a scene that repeats itself, almost identically in the life of every Scorpio. The moment when someone, finally confronted with a truth they tried to hide, looks them in the eye and says, "I don't know how you knew." And the Scorpio, almost always, doesn't respond, because explaining their own radar to someone who never needed to develop one would be like trying to describe a color to someone who has never seen it. This silence, however, is not coldness. It is weariness. The weariness of someone who has spent their life being the first to notice and the last to be heard. And it is precisely at this point that the most profound transformation of this sign lies. Learning that the gift of seeing does not need to be accompanied by the obligation to prove it. That sometimes the truth reveals itself on its own, in its own time, without needing to drag anyone to it by force. There's something almost sacred about it, because while the world teaches people to believe what's convenient, Scorpio is born equipped to see what's real, even when reality hurts more than the comfortable lie. And perhaps that's the true definition of the gift most feared by their enemies. It's not the power to destroy those who lie. It's the power to simply know with unwavering calm and let the truth do its own work. What if, starting today, you stopped apologizing for knowing too much and began asking, what does this gift want to show me about myself, and not just about others? This question is the beginning of a real turning point, and that's exactly where the divine wisdom that guides your zodiac sign to a purposeful life comes in. As a guide to transforming keen perception into conscious purpose instead of constant vigilance. It's for those who are tired of protecting everyone else and have forgotten to protect themselves first. Access is limited and may be taken down without prior notice. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's a common scene in the life of any Scorpio that's rarely told this way. The moment when they consciously decide not to use everything they perceive, because knowing is one thing. Choosing what to do with that knowledge is another, much more difficult one. There's enormous power in keeping silent when you could expose yourself, in letting someone believe they deceived you, simply because it's not worth wasting energy proving the obvious to someone who will never admit it. This strategic silence is perhaps the most mature form of the Scorpio gift, not the absence of perception, but the deliberate choice of when to use it. And it's curious how this same silence is often mistaken for indifference. People around think that by not reacting at the time, the Scorpio didn't notice, didn't care, didn't feel anything. But what really happens is the opposite. They processed it so quickly and so deeply that they've already decided what space it will occupy within them. Some facts gain a place of permanent importance. Others are silently filed away, without drama, without a scene, simply recorded as information about who the person really is. Perhaps that's why regaining a Scorpio's trust is as difficult as they say. It's not stubbornness. It's that their radar already has enough data, and data can't be erased by good intentions or well-constructed excuses. It takes time, consistency, and above all, coherence between what is said and what is done. Because it is precisely this coherence, or lack thereof, that the Scorpio's gift measures all the time, even unintentionally. And there's yet another layer rarely discussed, the moment when Scorpio realizes that they too can be forgiven, that the same unforgiving standard you apply to others can finally be softened when applied to yourself. because all that power to see deeply, if not balanced with compassion, becomes loneliness disguised as strength. And the true emotional maturity of this sign isn't about never making mistakes, nor about never trusting too much. It's about making mistakes, realizing them, and still choosing to remain open. In the end, perhaps Scorpio's most feared gift has never been the ability to see others. Perhaps it has always been the courage to continue feeling, even after having seen so much. Because it's easy to harden when you understand too much. The difficult, the truly rare thing, is keeping your heart open even knowing exactly how much it can be hurt. There's a silent beauty in this that few stop to recognize. Scorpio isn't the sign that fears the darkness. It's the sign that has learned to cross it and still return capable of love. Each disappointment experienced didn't turn them to stone. It transformed them into depth. Each lie perceived didn't make them cold. It made them precise. And perhaps that, in the end, is the true power that so frightens those who prefer to live on the surface. The tranquil certainty of someone who has already been at the bottom of their own abyss and returned from there more whole than ever. If you've made it this far, perhaps you've already recognized this gift in yourself, even if you've never had words for it. And if that's the case, know this: there's nothing wrong with seeing too deeply. The world is just still learning how to deal with those who refuse to believe only on the surface.